Good evening, everyone. Hello, my name is Jacqueline Coley. I'm the awards editor at Rotten Tomatoes, and it is my honor to welcome to the stage the few of the filmmakers and cast of the incredible series you just watched, Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. First, we have Ramsey Avery, the production designer for the entire series. We also have Maxim Baldry, who plays Isildur, and Ismael Cruz Córdova, who plays Arondir. I want to talk with you, Ismael, because this is what's crazy, is every actor gets a job, and there's a lot of actors I know out here in the audience, and when you get a job, there's a challenge, but in this one, it's high fantasy, so this is like the ask. You have Shakespearean-like drama and sort of like gravitas. You also have, I would say, the word jumbles of the most intense medical drama, because some of these words, they're just coming out of nowhere, including most of your cast characters' names. And then on top of that, you know, John McClane type, die-hard level action, and that's what they say to you on the first day that you're signing up for. So like, I have to ask, what was the audition process like? Because it can't just be one or the other. And so what was the first thing they wanted you to do?
Audition wise, at first the breakdown said Aragorn type, classically trained, good with words, and they were very like, and with a little physicality. After watching that episode, with a little physicality, what the hell? And but it just, I mean, it was focusing more on performance at the beginning, that kind of Shakespearean thing, and I was playing that Aragorn type kind of guy, you know, more, I mean, a man, yeah. So the physicality was very different. So, I mean, it was several months. I was in different countries. We're sending these tapes. At one point, like the final one that I told this story, you know, I was in a tent in the desert of South Africa, making this thing in the middle of a sandstorm, and you know, there was no Wi-Fi. We had to like send it out to the next town over that was like 2 hours away to just like get this audition up. And I got my third no at that point. Like, nope, we don't like you. It wasn't like that. We're like, you're amazing, but it's not for you. But finally, they brought me back, and when I did my final audition, 12 hours before. So when I got a call, they were like, hey, by the way, you're playing an elf. And if you're an actor here, you know that changes your entire physicality. And where you're playing it from the center, the openness of the chest, like everything, like it completely shifts what you have to do, which sent the other, I mean, I've spoken to the other 5 guys after that. It sent them like spinning. And for me, because I always wanted to be an elf, I was like, yes. It's like, yes, that's when I broke out of the pack. I was like, let's go. So yeah, I mean, that audition process was very Shakespearean in that sense, but you know, our showrunners, writers, creators, it feels like you're doing something much smaller. Like they've always had their ears out for what we have to bring. So much so that in that audition, that last one, I had an improvisation that made it to the show. You know, they're
well, tell the tale.
I mean, the third episode. Have you guys watched this?
I mean, they're on 7 here, so they've already.
Yeah, so you've seen the show. So like in the third episode, when I go to cut the tree down, and I ask for forgiveness for the tree. That's something that came out of an improvisation that I did following that call in New Zealand. I went to the park and I started understanding more. It's like, oh, that's why this Aragorn type loves trees. And it's like, makes sense now, you know, because he's an elf. So it's like their spirituality is so deep. So I was like, I must ask for forgiveness. And during the audition, I made up my own Elvish. We filled in those gaps later. And I did it during the final screen test. And it stayed. And it's that very powerful moment in episode 3 where I just go and I touch it and I said Anin Apsene before chopping it. Yeah.
I do have to say, Maxim, with your character, the gravitas comes with just the name of the character. Like if the minute they tell you that you're going to play Isildur, you know, like this is from the cut scene at the beginning of the movie. This is the guy, right? The gravitas of the character is another edge to everything that I just mentioned between the language, the action, the physicality, and the sort of Shakespearean aspect of it. Was that something you knew going into it, or was that something to let you know later?
No, I think it was similar to Ismael's kind of experience as well. Like I was auditioning for this, I mean, I remember the log line, it was hilarious. I was like, who am I playing? They're like, oh, he's a mercurial young man with the weight of the world on his shoulders. And I was like, what? So I had no idea what to kind of do, but I kind of threw my hat in the ring. But there's a great deal, when I found out who I was playing, there was a great deal of expectation on that, because I feel like meeting a lot of the fans since, you know, the show came out, you know, people have a real connection to the books and the characters, and they have a sense of ownership over those characters as well. So it's a real privilege and an honor to kind of continue the sort of storytelling of this great writer, who I also kind of delved into since being involved in the project. The stories that he makes are just so human and so honest, and I think, you know, we are in high fantasy, but it's also, you know, stories about human beings trying to you know, deal with certain things like incredible like action routines, but also they're just sort of balancing whether they're good and evil, and I think that kind of honesty is just lovely to explore. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that honesty. And yes, it is incredible to watch. If I haven't said enough about this series, in addition to breaking the internet several times over, 100 million, I think, is the record that it broke on Amazon. It's also something that it's Tolkien, who is completely mysterious and ever-presently familiar. He's an author that everybody knows, but then there's just aspects of him that people don't know, and your two characters sort of reflect that, whereas in maybe Stephen Colbert definitely knows everything about your character, but like me, even the most casual Tolkien fan, I'm like, I know Isildur, that's my guy, dude, I know who that is, right? But I will say, Ramsey, with your job is to bring the ordinary to both folks, whether they be the person that knows this incredibly well or the person who is just approaching it from the outside. And that comes from, I don't know, every aspect of what's around them, whether they're, you know, talking about the set that they're walking into and the world they're walking into. How did you balance that? And just the idea that, especially in the visual setting, The Lord of the Rings has already given you a lot of tape that you have to work with and sometimes against.
Yeah, it starts from taking a look at what we already know from the movies and knowing that we didn't want to do the movies because that's 3,000 years in the future, so that doesn't make any sense for what we're doing now. And how do we then find what's pure for us, and going back to everything starting with Tolkien's drawings, because he drew himself, and there's a whole version of the world that he created, and then all the artists that came along the way past that for another 70 years of design development. And then figuring out how each element of each culture, what the core elements of each culture were, how each elf or human or different type of human, what their baseline elements were to make them into who they were. Like elves are of nature and dwarves are of stone and of flame, and trying to figure out those core elements, and then shifting that into what would we recognize as people who live in our world. What are the touchstones for what we recognize as what would be Elven, like an Art Nouveau, but that isn't, you don't really want to do Art Nouveau, you want to do Elven. So trying to find all of those different elements and tie those together within the emotional character of each scene and each culture. It was a lot of threads to pull together, but all of the time trying to make sure that it was real and that it was in camera. Very little, we didn't want to do any more visual effects than we actually had to do, and to make sure that everything had texture, and even to some degrees that everything had smells, you know, so that places felt as real as they possibly could, so the actors could come into a space and feel like they were there.
Yeah, I will say that if there's anything I think that they definitely borrowed from the first that you can feel, it's that get these actors, put them in that place, and make them married to the physical, like visual look of it, because you know you're going to be there for a long time. And I know for you two as the actors, there's a lot that you have to just take a leap with, no matter how great the sets that Ramsey and how great the costumes are. What was it for you, sort of like where you knew the world stopped being fantasy, where it felt real? Was there a moment with the character? Was it a moment on set where all of this sort of faded away for you as an actor? Because I feel like that's when it stops being the portrayal and it really becomes real. And that's what we saw when we finally see the finished product. So when did that first happen? Was it a first episode? Was it early in pre-production? Ismael, I'll start with you.
I'm thinking there's just so many moments, because we began way before, and then COVID extended that time as well. And as Ramsey was saying, there were, and you were mentioning as well, a lot of elements were built. So you are interacting with, and they were not only just built; they were built by master artists, you know, masters of each craft. So you are really interacting with the thing. That comes with that energy, that comes with that hand building, like everything felt real. So to have that opportunity as an actor, I don't know when else I will, you know, because you see a lot of movies that screen everywhere. We were in these sets that were, they activated your sense of wonder as a child. That thing that you see when you're playing, you go, pew, 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 you know, and you're like, oh man, I'm gonna go on the cliff, save me. You know, then you're seeing the thing. That's how you felt every single step of the way. For me, the most stripped down one was the one that gave me the more, helped me pull the most, which was, I mean, both episode 3 and episode 6, that had to do, that the character breaks down so much. I mean, the trenches, the training for that mimicked the exhaustion that the character is going through, the loss, just under the heat and under those conditions, weeks after, like just, and it broke it down to a point where I was really existing in that set. You know, when you see that, the emotion was there, the circumstances were there. And that's, you know, that 3rd episode, but also the one that you see here when I'm being faced again with loss and all of these elements, and the extras were, you see there's a lot of extras in this episode. They were so committed. Like, there was not a single one that wasn't living the fantasy. And so when you look around, like, you really, everything, to the last one that is blurry over there, was truly supporting the work that we were doing. So it felt real. Like, there were moments that, you know, I was like, you know, walking around seeing the brush move, and I really was the thing. People were like, just take your ears off. We like rapped 2 hours ago.
No, you want to feel the fantasy a little while longer. That's you want to take. No, that's when you looked good on the red carpet and you want to keep the makeup on that extra hour. I feel that. I understand that. Maxim, I want to talk to you about this too, because the mercurial, that's why I said that on that log line, because there is the 1,000-yard stare that Isildur has from pretty much the minute he comes on screen, and everyone kind of, I think, is just.
You do that as well, don't you?
Yeah. Everyone is
Let's
going.
do it now.
Oh yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Give it to the camera. The camera's back there. Give it to him. Yes. Oh my God. Yes.
I pay the bills.
I mean, seriously though. But I want to talk to you about it, Maxim, because that sort of underlying thing, it's sort of like Ramsey's production design. It's underneath everything, but you can't, like, he's a man of soft-spoken words. Like, he's just dealing with a lot in this. And I feel like that is, like, delicious sometimes for an actor, but also difficult considering everything else that's going on. So how did you sort of approach his internal conflict, and how he's sort of, with Galadriel, a lot of the times trying to be the same voice, but then not? I don't know. It's weird.
I think I really wanted to create a sort of authentic human experience, which is a young person struggling with his idea of identity and where he fits into a sort of world that's at a schism. Partly one element's going pro-Elvish, the other one's going like towards the sort of more kind of traditional patriotic kind of style of Numenor. And I think I actually don't think Isildur could articulate his feelings very well. So he kind of internalized it and felt a bit alone. And there's the only experience that he really opens up with the character rather is his horse. And I was like, this feels real and natural. And then I think Patrick and JD, the showrunners, were like, let's roll with that. And let's kind of extend this relationship. And was this 106?
This is 107, right? 6.
106.
Sorry.
Yeah, there's this great bit where I like feed Beric an apple, and then they were like, "Why don't you just eat it?" And so we shared an apple together with the horse, and that action just kind of really felt authentic and real to him, and yeah, that was something that I found in the kind of in the doing that I didn't really know about him before. That was quite nice.
Yeah, I definitely want to come back and talk about these two, because we have the land, like the land of elves and the land of men, but you two are definitely the tortured emo kids of both of those worlds. And I really want to talk about how that's where y'all live in this series, because it's great. Ramsey, I will say with you, the Numenor was and on top of everything that was so fantastical about this series, just the minute we saw the first shot of Numenor, I was just gobsmacked. It is really exceptional, and that one, as I know, we couldn't lean as much on practical effects, obviously. So talk about how that marriage came together between production design, visual effects, and sort of really making that world.
Well, we really did build I don't remember how many acres, but we built a lot of Numenor, and it was 40 feet tall, and it filled, we did a tank, we did streets, we did plazas. So yeah, I mean, it really was, we developed, working with the directors and with the showrunners, how much we could take streets and alleyways and plazas and turn them into other things by dressing or adding a wall here. So a lot of it was just really built as much as we possibly could. And otherwise it was trying to figure out what is Numenor, because no one's ever really, we don't have any real representations of what Numenor is. Artists have done it over time, but the clue for us was, at one point Tolkien wrote a letter to a friend saying, I just got back from Numenor. Oh, I mean Venice. So there was this kind of sense of the idea of how history of Venice would have been layered up through time, that you've got hundreds of years there, and we needed thousands of years in our world. So we just worked through a series of what was the original Elvish influence, and then how did it become less and less Elvish and more stridently human over time. And then how did that expand from the set pieces, where you can actually see that, like the wharf has Elvish elements in it, and then as you move up through the city, which is various levels of the city, it gets more and more human-y. And we did that also in the visual effects world. So we just tried to figure out how to do that layering, both in the visual effects and in the practical world.
I want folks, after this, everyone, we go upstairs, there's going to be a reception on the penthouse. A lot of the costumes and several of the stuff from Lord of the Rings is upstairs. So that was just looking at, staring at your costume, I think is up there. And I'm just like, whoa, this is intense. But on set, you're still having to deal with the daily aspects of a daily grind every single day, doing what you guys are doing with it. And you're still trying to find the authenticity of each character. Each of these characters go through an arc that is not like the log line y'all got on the audition, or even like the character descriptions folks got. Now that folks have seen the series, knowing where we're going, where do you think you would say your character, where you leave them and where you want to find them in the next season? Because I think folks are, well, if what we can talk about, obviously, are going to be interested to see. Where do you think, give me the preview log line for where you think Arondir is going.
I always think, and again, like these characters, it was such a long time shooting as well. That we lived with them in a way that you don't live with characters. They were also shot through COVID, so everything became more heightened and important. At one point, I think we were the only production in the world shooting. I think that was uninterrupted. And all the things around it, it's dealing with some backlash about it as well. The characters became more than just characters. They really were reflections and almost like spiritual incarnations of what we were going through in the world. And I felt that, that brokenness and that loss that the character goes through, because it's rapid. Like, he just loses so much, and he is eternal. He's an eternal being. So that experience with loss and that love for the other, the forbidden other, the human, I always say that if we were to stay in those circumstances, he would somehow evolve into a human. Because there's a crack in which humanity is filtering in. And that is what he's experiencing. Just you see him kind of trying to pop out of his stoic self, and he's getting infected, with humanity. Like, there's a thing, what are these feelings that I'm feeling? What is this loss that I'm experiencing? He's fascinated by that. So I would say he would kind of morph into some sort of hybrid human character, kind of like Elrond is the opposite, So I think that could be in my own that's something that I use as for the character. He's seeping. This humanity. There's a crack from the loss and from the love that he's feeling, and all these things are seeping through. So that's something that I keep in the back of my head. Yeah.
Every sad, lonely emo boy's got a girl that he's got, that he can't. Both of them. Both of them. Or person. with Isildur, it's different, but it's also the same thing where I feel this is a character where, like, let's be honest, we know it's last chapter, but folks are still very interested to know all the chapters in between. What are you hoping is going to happen with your character in these next few chapters?
Well, that's one of the conversations I had with JD and Patrick before I even started filming. I was like, right, well, what's the journey? Like, how do we get to where we know he ends up? What's the beginning? And they said, I mean, the season 1 is just him kind of at the cusp of adulthood, trying to understand himself, find himself. Season 2 is more about him becoming a man and everything that entails with that.
Giddy
That's
up.
kind of exciting.
Giddy
And an iPod that has My Chemical Romance on, of course. He's still an emo kid at heart.
I mean, am I wrong? I think I'm right on that. Like, they have the weight of the world on their shoulders, quite literally, throughout this. And there's not a lot of happy moments for these characters. So, Ramsey, I want to talk about this because Tolkien is obviously very expansive. Not a man of few words on describing anything, literally, from a tree branch to how someone lifts their arm. You can drown in it if you're not careful, I think, if you're doing research. What was something that you found, though, in the research, or something that you discussed with the showrunners or either the directors that you found really sort of instructive on how you approached this project that you didn't know sort of going into it about Tolkien or how he approached the world? Like, what was something sort of like one of that fun fact nugget that you kind of just want to put on your vision board every day when you're trying to build a set to say, okay, we got to stay true to this sort of kernel?
I think the most interesting thing is he contradicted himself all the time. So what ended up actually in the books is very specific with The Lord of the Rings itself, but anything else that's there about Tolkien is interpretations that his son then did editing on. So there are various versions of each and all of the stories. So you can go through all of that and start to find the parts and pieces that make sense in our story and how that relates specifically to what we're doing. So there's versions of, there's multiple versions of how Numenor is represented in terms of being either very Italian or being very kind of more highfalutin fantasy world, and then just trying to find the bits and pieces in that makes the more sense in what the stories that we're trying to tell. But really the thing that I thought was most fun was the fact that I was terrified taking this on because of the whole sense of there's all of that world and there's so many expectations. Everybody has a very specific idea of what these worlds look like. But then going back and realizing that he kept changing it his whole life up until the very end. He was changing his ideas and trying to figure out how he was going to make it, so that allowed us to go, here's the story that we're trying to tell that makes sense in our point of time. And it was beyond the fact that I realized that everybody that I was working with, from the actors to the showrunners to the directors to every person on the crew, loved this material, and they were all deeply invested in this material. So everybody was doing it out of a place of warmth and commitment and desire to make it real. So the fact that we could embrace those parts that we could find in the words that made sense to us that he had written and convect that into our world was a very kind of freeing experience in the long run.
There was tons of fans I know on set, but then from Comic-Con to all of the people watching it to I don't know how many TikToks, very, very thirsty TikToks I have seen. You've definitely gotten to hear from the fans about the reaction to the show. And no matter what anybody had to say on the negative side, I just think the overwhelming and positive response has to be, as an actor, kind of jaw-dropping. Like,
yeah, I mean, I was actually in Stuttgart yesterday. My God.
aren't you the jet setter?
I was in Stuttgart yesterday at the Comic-Con, and this girl came up dressed as Isildur, and I was like, wow, this is incredible. Like, did you enjoy the show? And she said, oh, this is my experience with my father, like on screen. And I was like, that just kind of connected with me, because I think as an actor, if you can even connect with someone on that sort of level, if you influence them or if they have an emotional response to your work, that is just a real honor and a gift. So I think that experience just really made me feel like it was all worthwhile, you know, and that's just on a completely micro scale. I mean, the messages that we get as well are just so overwhelmingly positive, and it's been an honor and a complete whirlwind. I mean, this is so lovely to even be talking about this show as well, and thank you, you know.
Yeah, and I will say this, not everyone, because, you know, not everybody is great, but everyone up here is. But one of the things I will even say is, even in the more darker moments around some of the not great people who hadn't seen this show and were judging it for silly reasons like racism, there was still a great moment of joy, and I got to experience it because there's already been accolades for the show. I don't know if folks know this, but Ismael here has already been honored by the Critics' Choice Association as one of the honorees this year by Latino Cinema Excellence in Television. And so I'm going to definitely give you like a huge round of applause for that.
Thank you.
First of many, I'm sure. But what was great about that, and what you folks will be able to see in February when that broadcast comes out, is your speech accepting that, where you talked about, yes, the positive messages, but you also talked about the negative side of it, but you wrapped it up in this just incredibly uplifting bow that I would love for you to share a little bit of that, because I really do feel like, again, if you had the privilege to be in the room that night to hear him talk about his experience with the show, but also what it meant for him, the representation that he was able to give to it, again, I want everyone to get a peek of this, and so if you could please just share those thoughts again. Sorry.
Well, and I mean, I get emotional about this because, as I was saying earlier, it is impossible. It has been impossible for me to extricate myself from the character, and I think often we get asked to somehow, and I think it's a little weird to extricate yourself from your art, because you have some jobs that is like the being is not the doing, but for us the being is the doing. So it's almost impossible to like not do that. And with the show, I wanted to be enough for a long time, and since I those words came out of my mouth when I was a young boy, it was said to me that I couldn't because of how I looked. So it's been a lifelong journey with it, and I fought for the role tooth and nail, deeply and really hard earned. And as soon as my headshot came out, it was a wave of racism. Like 2 years ago, it was just a wave. It was insistent and harassment. I mean, I don't really run my socials anymore. I've had to change my phone number 3 times. My family has had to like change passwords, this and that, to the point of death threats. Yes, people are this crazy. And so for me, this role, every day when you see the character, you are seeing me put my boots on and wading through these kinds of murky waters. And so it was not casual. There was not a second of my day doing the show or any frame that you don't see. There's a casual performance. It is fully, you see the emo kid, that kid is like truly feeling. Because I knew that I had to be the elfiest elf that ever elfed. And that's a hashtag.
And he did, and he did, and
that's
he
a
did.
hashtag on Twitter, the elfiest elf. But it's the old adage, you have to be kind of like 10 times better when you're in a position of being minoritized. So that, because I knew that I had to be some sort of bulletproof. But even that, like I didn't escape it. I mean, when the character pictures came about, the beautiful day in which the world saw my picture was one of the most bitter days for me, because I couldn't just the overflow of negativity, and so on and so forth. When the show came out, there was another wave of it. But by this point, I'm sipping my tea, and I've been sipping my tea the entire time.
Because the show is the show.
Because the work is the work, and the show is the show, and the mission is the mission. And it was that one must see oneself to imagine oneself to create oneself. And you see this character now, and the ripple that it has through the world of fantasy and beyond is real. I see it every single day. I see these little kids wearing their costumes. You see ladies dressed like you as well. Just like Isildur. Like it's incredible. And for me, these moments when you get the mic, these awards, this season, there comes a moment in every artist's life that you have got to let go of wanting to have accolades. You have got to let go of wanting to get an award. You have to really be like, yeah, sure, whatever, in a certain way. So what is an award, and what are these things that we're doing? It's sending a message, and it's joining the movement. That's what I told everyone. What you're doing with this award, and that you have me up here talking, you're saying, I'm with you. And I got you, and you're not going to be silenced, and we're going to amplify you, and we're here for this movement, and we're here for this moment, and we believe that you belong, and that you exist and that you matter. And what I said was, we're here, we've been here, we're not going anywhere. So that's what I say tonight as well.
And I can't think of a better way to end it, and I think that is a beautiful story. So I want to remind everyone that Lord of the Rings of Power is available for voting in all categories. Thank you all. Thank the folks at Amazon, and of course the cast and
Thank
filmmakers.
you.
Thank all of you.